I hope that after today's workshop you get some of your questions answered and also maybe learn some things about the Moodle Gradebook you didn't know before. Moodle, as you know, is the university's learning management system for all blended and online courses. And there are also many faculty who teach the traditional face-to-face courses who use Moodle for a variety of purposes, such as sharing documents with students, allowing students to submit assignments, and providing feedback. We believe the Moodle Gradebook actually has a lot of features that make it worthwhile for an instructor to use. And that's because it has a variety of options for how Moodle allows instructors to set up their grades or their gradebook. And it has a variety of ways in which students can, or how faculty can connect with their students. So, quick question: Has everyone been able to log in? Everybody has come to this course right here called Instructor Workshop?
No.
If you hit your
refresh button.
Or the My Courses button.
If you picked up an agenda on the way in, I'm going to start us off today talking a little bit about how you might want to think about setting up your gradebook for your course, and a variety of options that you have available to you as the instructor. Time permitting, we'll also talk a little bit about grading assignments and what is the student view, and let you in on some upcoming news on the new features of Moodle, of the update that will happen next month, and then some resources for where you can go for additional information. And I also have my colleagues here, Jason McKenzie and Patty Patrick, who will be filling in for questions and assisting you if you have issues with the login. So the first thing I'd like to kind of introduce is the setting up of your Moodle gradebook. Typically in a course, you will see topics per week or per module that you set up, or if you're teaching a course, like in many of the degree completion courses, you will be teaching a course someone else has developed, and you are teaching that content. So I'm using a course here that we're using for our training, and I'm going to be focusing on the module called Moodle Gradebook. So in the Moodle Gradebook module, I have set up a series of assignments, and as an instructor in this course, I'm also going to go ahead and turn editing on. That allows me to make some adjustments if I need to. As a teacher role in this course that you've been given, you will be able to follow along. But here I have a number of assignments. So for the purpose of this workshop, let's assume that this is my course, right? So I have 2 discussion forums, and I recognize them by labeling them. I have 2 assignments, paper 1 and paper 2, and I have 2 journal assignments. So 6 assignments total. And this might be the order in which I want students to complete them, but it may not be. So let's say this might be week 1, this might be week 2, and this might be week 3. And for the student in particular, it is always helpful to know how or in which order assignments should be completed. And obviously in a longer course, such as the 6-week course, I may have many more. And in a whole semester course, I have even additional ones. So from from a naming perspective, I always like to encourage faculty to think about what are some descriptive terms for the assignment that actually are related in some way to perhaps the content that students are studying. So I might have journal 1, journal 2, journal 3, but if the longer the courses and the many or the more types of assignment there are of one kind, it might be useful for students to have a perhaps a little bit more of a descriptive term of the assignment. So let's say I have discussion forum 1 and I have discussion forum 2, but I haven't indicated that, right? I don't know if this is the order in which I want students to complete them. So just from a simple naming perspective, I would recommend that we think about naming assignments that are actually useful for students. Let's see if I focus on discussion forums. If I have a discussion forum in week 2 and one in week 2 and week 3, it might be useful to actually use something like, this is what I do in my course that has worked really well for me, to say the first assignment in my course, if it is a discussion forum, I say it's in week 1 and it is actually the first assignment that will be due. So discussion forum, and I might even add something like this, so that when students see the assignment itself without even clicking on it, they now have, I'm gonna make that maybe a little smaller. Without even clicking on it now, I might be able to differentiate, and I'll give a little bit of context before students even click on an assignment and know and this would, if I have anything in parentheses, I usually make that a connection to the reading for that week or the topic for that week to just give a little bit of context. Well, if this one is in week 1, I might want to label this one as an indicator of week 2. And
now, what did you click on to get that? To get where you changed the topic?
okay, let me go back. So I have turned editing on.
Right.
In the upper right corner.
I did that.
Okay. And then to make the change on the actual assignment, I go to the edit button right here.
The one straight across from it?
That's correct, yes.
And I went there, and
So if I
settings?
I just said edit settings.
Okay,
Yeah. Skip the step there.
that's the button, I wasn't sure which one to push.
This says 6-1. Did somebody add something?
He didn't.
You did?
Yours is close enough there.
I shouldn't be monkeying it while you're
Well-
monkeying with it?
Well, it's okay.
I didn't realize we were all on the same
You
exact
are
one.
enrolled as a teacher.
Good, good thing I put something respectable.
I like it. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, let's leave it there. So in your setting, you might have something on forgiveness, and so immediately you have a little bit more context about that. Okay. So in my course, if I have a 6 that says, okay, everything in 6 would be part of module 6, right? So let's just leave that there, and the 1 means it's the first assignment for that week. So I'm going to go with that for now and say, all right, let's just say.
I think I might have changed your other one too.
You're ahead of me.
Sorry.
You're ahead of me here. All right.
Practice.
That's good.
I did.
Yep.
Okay.
So if you have any anger, I hope you will forgive me.
Okay. very good. That's actually a great example for the kinds of topics you might want to think about. So that actually go together, right? So here I have paper 1 and paper 2, but you know, from a student perspective, that's what I don't really see the difference on the course page. What could I call paper 1? If I just want to relabel, I can. So here, if I just want to edit the title without editing anything else, I can also click on this little hand. Sometimes that window is a little short, and so it's not always my preference. But let's say I would do this and I would give it a little bit more information. Now, if it's still part of Module 1, I'd say, okay, that's still part of Module 1, but that's maybe now my second assignment that I want students to complete. And paper 1 focuses on personal history of anger or something like that. So if I just want to change the title, I can do that here, and I can do that a little bit more quickly. Okay. I have another paper due in this class, and so since had someone jump far ahead of me in 2, I'm going to say that also will be part of Module 2, and paper 2 will be on social perspectives. Now, are we starting to see a pattern of how we can make a little bit more descriptive assignments within the course, especially when a course gets longer? Very important for students to be able to see the connection between the actual content, the actual topics of the course, and so they can perceive it even before clicking on it. Let me do the same with the journal and do something similar here. I'm going to go to I'm going to say this is also due in the first module, but this is the third assignment they will be doing. Did you see how I now have 6 assignments here, 3 in the first module, 3 in module 6, assuming I'm just working on those 2. Okay, so this is what I would see and what students would see on the home page of the course. Let's take a look now I want to actually make sure I have all my assignments for the course. Looking at my syllabus, I have all my assignments set up in the Moodle Gradebook. I want to make sure that all the assignments in the Gradebook that I have listed actually appear in the Gradebook as well, because that's how it's going to be most useful to me for grading, but more importantly, it's going to be most useful to students, because they're going to be able to see all the assignments in the Gradebook, and should be able to make a comparison to the syllabus that would add up to the same points. So I'm going to go I can go to grades. If I click on grades, I would typically see the grades in this, and I'm going to refresh this, and so this will now, as I'm looking at my gradebook right now, what do you notice? I've numbered them.
They're reordered?
Out of order.
They're out of order. Now, if I go back to my course, are they in the order here that I?
No.
They're not in the same order here. So wouldn't I want them in this type of order? I can do that by just clicking and holding and dragging them on this cross here. And I probably would want to order them this way as well. So I have some sense of order, right? Okay. Now, if I go back to my grade view, let me see if that makes any difference there, and I'm going to refresh it. So I have 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 6, 1, 6, 2, 6, 3. So that's kind of the order in which they would display. But when I go back to the grade view, I don't see that same order. Why is that? What happens on the front page of Moodle doesn't necessarily correspond to the Moodle Gradebook. Okay, so now I all of a sudden have, I'm starting with the journal here, and you know how I can quickly tell is because I've numbered them, right? If I don't number them, I don't have that quick of an overview. So 1, 3, 1, 2, 6, really what I want, where is 1, 1? Don't I want to start with 1, 1? It doesn't even show up here. So I should have 6 assignments here, right? That's what we had, 6 assignments. So not only are they out of order, but one doesn't show up. What might be the issue?
Maybe you hadn't identified it as a graded assignment?
That is correct. I haven't identified it. So while it shows up here, and students are doing work, I will not be able to assign them any point value because I have not assigned it a point value. And therefore it doesn't show up. It may show up here, any non-graded assignment. So so this one is not appearing. So if I want this to be part of my overall grade and I have identified it as such in the syllabus, I really want to be sure it also appears in the gradebook. So what can I do to have it show up? I need to go in, and there are more than one way to go in here, but I'm going to go in here and click on Edit. And I'm going to go ahead and say Edit Settings and see why it is not, what I need to do to have it appear in the gradebook. There are 2 areas that look like they are a grade in the gradebook, but if in the forums, but in grade, it really doesn't allow me to do any settings. It just says uncategorized. But here, under ratings, there's my problem. I have no ratings. So this would be good for if I want students to reflect on something that they would do without a grade. Or I want them to respond to an answer that I'm not assigning a grade to. And I might want to do that, but in my case, I really want this to show up in the gradebook.
Where did you find that section? Under course grade settings?
For
What you're doing there?
I clicked on Edit,
Yes.
and then I'm gonna update the form.
Oh, okay.
And I scroll all the way down to the ratings section. And here is where I need to make a decision. Most typically, I say sum of ratings instead of average of ratings. That would be however many times students post. I want the sum of ratings, and I'm gonna say that's about 15 points. I can set a date, but I'm not going to. Just right now, I want to make sure it has points.
Mm-hmm.
So now, if I go to the grade view, let me just show you where I get that. When I click on grades here, I have this window already open. I'm going to refresh it, and I should be able to see this now. And there it is. Excuse me. Thank you. So there it is. This tells me now that it is a graded assignment. But I still don't have them in the order in which I would like them. Because if I want a certain order in which I want students to complete them, it really helps to kind of see them in that order. And if you have many assignments, you find yourself scrolling to the right. So how do I get these assignments into the order that I now want them? One way to do that is to go to the Gradebook Setup area, which is right right below grades. And I have that window already open, so I'm going to go there directly. So if I click on Gradebook Setup, there's the view and there's the setup. So I'm just going to primarily focus on these two areas. And in this case, I have the grade up set up, and you see the numbers are not there because I opened this window before I added the numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and do a refresh, and I should be able to reorder them here. So I want to move this, no, excuse me, I want to move this to the top, right? I want this to be number 1. And if I click on that, I say I want to move this over here. Now that's at the top. Next, I want to move 1, 2. And I want to move this right below 1, 1. And so these 3 are now in the order that I would like them. But I want to reorder the second set here. I'm going to go back to my grades view and go ahead and refresh my page. And now I have all the assignments in the order that I would like them. 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 6, 1, 6, 2, 6, 3. So if I just have all the assignments listed in the course in the order that the students should complete them or are completing them, then when students go to their gradebook, and I can actually see, that comes a little bit later, I can actually go here and go to the view area, right? User report is what a student would see. And the students would see them in this order. And if students have a grade, they would have received the grade within this range. And they would know what percentage that is of the course. And if you have left any feedback as the instructor, that would appear here. So that's...
Only the students see the individual students see the responses?
Oh yeah, they only see their grades.
Oh, okay.
Yes, yes,
Okay,
they only
alright.
see their grades, yes, that would, but, to know what students see, right, you can go to the view, that's what you see, because you are the grader, right? You are the grader, so if you click on grader report, that's what you see as the grader. Student is the user, so if you want to know what the user sees, that's this view right here. So this kind of helps to see, this is how, so if they're not ordered, and you have this list of assignments, students might have a grade here, there, here, and it's sort of in between. This way, it's in a sequential order, and it also helps with communicating to students where they stand in the course and how they move through. So if this is at the end of week 1, they can see how they're doing. They see, oh, I'm doing well. And they can see week by week, and they don't have to jump around and find out how they're doing each week. So we're still in the process of setting up our gradebook. Now we occasionally have questions from faculty and say, well, I have the journals are worth 25%, and the papers are 50%, and the discussion forums are 25%. And I want them all categorized. I want no matter how many points I give, I want a certain type or category of assignments to be a certain percentage. How do I do that? Okay? Actually, we get that request quite frequently. How do we group assignments in such a way that we can assign percentages? Very often in the syllabus, you'll say that these assignments are worth this much, they're worth this much, all adding up to 100. If that is something that you're doing in your course, one way to do that is by creating categories. So assignments cannot be moved into a category until you create a category. So let's see what that would look like if we actually created a category. Make sure I get, I'm going to switch to Gradebook Setup. So creating categories in Gradebook Setup. So this is still part of the setup right here. Again, we can go to the view. You're the grader, the students are users. I'm not going to focus on these today, but I'm still in the setup phase. This is still part of that process of making sure I have all the grades that are also listed in my syllabus reflected in the Moodle gradebook. If I go to Setup under Gradebook Setup, we have organized our assignments. Now by putting them into categories, obviously I'm going to make a different order of my assignments, but that may be okay. So now I'm gonna create a category. One is called let's just call this discussions. And so if I create that category, it now shows up over here.
Would that be a place we might put class participation?
Well, how would we do that? I'm going to talk about that in just a sec.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
never mind.
because that doesn't.
I'll wait for you.
Yeah, that's a great question actually, because we don't have any way to figure for that right now, account for that, right?
Yeah, I don't in most of the classes I teach, but
So if I have a category of discussion, I'd like to have the discussions in that category, right? So I can select that, and I can select this one, and I should be able to move the selected items to discussions down here. Let's see what happens. So these two items are now in the discussions category. This one is worth 15 points, this one is worth 10 points. Why do I have 200 for this category? So something isn't right.
maybe the weighted part is incorrect.
Maybe the weighted part is not right. So there's something I need to change, because clearly this doesn't add up. This is a small, I can tell immediately. If it's a large class, it may not be that apparent. Let me see.
I've had that happen in a couple of classes, right, Patty? Where the percentages were way off.
So now, isn't there a sum?
Natural.
Natural is the same, okay.
So obvious.
Natural aggregation, so let's see what happens. Okay. So So the weights are 40 and 60 because of the point difference, but this is the same. So I could do the same with the others. So let's say I have all the categories set up and I have all the assignments accounted for except for one thing, and that is participation. Very often we see that faculty give credit for participation or maybe a presentation, right? That is separate from the actual PowerPoint, that assignment that students submit. How do I account for that? Because there's really nothing there's really nothing here that students have to do. That would assume you're either in a face-to-face course where students do something that you want to give a point value to, but students don't need to submit anything
I give extra credit.
or give extra credit. But somewhere it needs to be accounted for if it is part of the overall grade, and if you want to let students know where they stand. So there are ways to create an assignment in the gradebook that that does not require a submission of an assignment. So I can go back to the gradebook setup, and instead of adding a category, I can add a grade item. Okay. So let's say we want to give some points, 20 points, between 0 and 20 points.
And then does that automatically go into each class session?
Let's see where it shows up. So I'm going to add this. It goes into this course or grade category, so we don't have a separate category for that. But it should show up somewhere that I can grade. Where did it? Yeah, so it shows up. So it's 13% of the course. It's 20 points, and so I know it's there. Let's see what how this would appear to students. I'm just going to refresh it now because I added the categories. So if I go back to the student view, I now have the discussions grouped. They're still numbered, so that kind of can signal to students when they are due. So they're now in a different order because they're in a category, if that's important, and if you want to do the weighting. And down here, outside of those categories, we have now a section where it shows up for the student. Now, in terms of actually grading the assignments, let's see, grade view. I'm going to go back here to the grader report. Let's see where that shows up. You see my gradebook now has also shifted. There's the instructor workshop, the discussion categories. If I had them all there would be a discussion total there for journal, and the papers and the participation is right here. So that's all now part of the gradebook. Now I go back to my syllabus and compare and see if I have accounted for all the assignments that I'd like to include.
For some reason, I thought in participation, I had 6 for every single, in extra credit. I thought maybe I just had one block for it, but for some reason I thought I had it in every class.
Well, and you could create as many as you need to.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I have one participation overall, 20 points. But maybe if you meet 6 weeks, you might have five points every time. And then you could, if you wanted to track by week, if you're teaching a blended course and you wanted to track that by week, or you wanna teach, account for participation or attendance, that's another way to do that, to actually, if it's part of the grade, right, if it's part of the grade. So you could have participation week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay.
Have individual
Those would
points.
appear as different assignments, just like Journal 1 and Journal 2 would appear.
And you can tell if it's you can tell by the icon really. If it is an assignment added manually in the gradebook, it appears something like this versus a colored assignment, at least at this point in time. And that's how Moodle displays those. So that's a visual cue for you. And I believe we can also change the actual percentage of each of these categories. You know, we can say that this category, all the discussions, they may have 10 points, each may have 10 points, but the overall percentage of the category might only be 10 or 15% of the entire course. So that's if students miss a few of these, if they don't count for as much in the course, they may still do well and be able to pass the course. I believe that the categories for category value can be set up individually and how it's weighted. I think right now it's just taken an average. It's just the aggregation, and it just calculates the it calculates the total, taking so we selected natural, but you could actually set that to a different percentage. Sometimes we see faculty using just percentages instead of point values. Then you actually would have to work backwards and say, well, if all the discussions are worth 40%, what's the actual point value, individual point values? You'd have to work that backwards. Any questions on the setup? Before I go into some of the grading and posting grades.
I'll call you when I get started.
Okay. All right. So let's say that I am now I am ready to start teaching the course, and students are starting to submit assignments. There are two primary areas where I can submit grades, right? I can submit grades directly into the gradebook, and I can go directly to the assignment. There are advantages, there are pros and cons to both. If I know the grade, it's quicker to enter it here. And if I do it here, I want to make sure I have turned editing on. But with discussion forums, you know, it's not always, if I don't see a submission here, then students haven't submitted anything, right? And so in this case, I can't really grade it here. That's different for assignments. For the forums, you can't really grade here. So let's see, these 3 students really haven't graded anything, or have not submitted anything, or maybe it's dependent based on a presentation in class. So let me go to an assignment. Let me go to paper 1. I can click on paper 1 and see what these students have submitted. In this case, I have a little bit I have a little bit more options. I know there are 3 students in the class. None of them have submitted because these are students that have been somewhat absent in the course. But if I click on submissions, I have now a variety of options for grading students. So this tells me whether a student has submitted in a traditional face-to-face course. Maybe you have received, students have emailed you the paper. We encourage students to really upload their paper because that gives you a record and you don't have to keep track of your email submissions. Really, we strongly encourage all faculty to use Moodle for all student submissions. Let's assume students have submitted their papers. I can go in here and start grading, right? For student 1, this will give the date of submission. If students have left a comment, you can see that down here. So let's say this student has done very well, and I'm going to give that student 26 out of 30, and then my comments, and I have other options. Now this is nice if you have checked, if you have a long paper that you can return to the student. Then you can upload that paper with your comments here. I usually rename my paper by adding my initials. That tells me in my files that I have read the paper and I have provided comments, so that paper has now a different file name than the student's papers and the one that I received. And I add it here. If we checked the feedback option for Moodle, which is a voice recording, you can also leave a voice recording, or maybe that's all you'd like to do. And I'm ready to notify students, and I can, if I'm ready to grade the next students, I'm going to say save and show next.
So Henrietta, what you did there was you downloaded their paper and then graded it instead of grading it?
I would have, if that was was a paper submission, right.
If you wanted to, or you don't have to? So,
Well,
I
to
don't-
read it, I would have to.
You would have to download it
Yes.
to your personal file?
Right, and there's also a way to download all, and I'm not sure if it's on this page, but there is an option to download all papers at once instead of one at a time. And I'm going to do the same here. Your comments are attached, notify students, yes, and missing something, and there's the next students. This student just really needs maybe a little bit more work, doing so well. If I provided a lot of feedback on the paper, this will typically be short, otherwise it will be longer. And I have no option to go forward, so I now have graded this assignment. So let's go back to my, this gives me an overview of the grade. And you see here on my, got myself out of my window here. Should have. Okay, so this paper is now graded. I graded it within the assignment itself, but I made a mistake, and the student who got 14 points, I recalculated, and I decided I want to really correct that grade, and really that student has earned 17 points. Oops, not 147. So I can come here and make that change. And we should be able to save that. That's directly on the gradebook. Notice that it has changed color. This means anytime if you see an orange colored grade cell, that means the grade has been entered on the gradebook itself, and it overrides any other grading that you have done. If you go back to the assignment, the way I just entered the grades, and try to change it there, it will not register. This will remain 17. So once it is orange, and you need to change it again, you want to come back to this gradebook to change it here. So, now the students have 26, 17, and 30. How are students, let's just, I'm just gonna, for the sake of time, I'm gonna say, I'm gonna grade these assignments here, all in the grade book, just so we can see a little bit of a pattern here. And Moodle saves automatically, or should here very shortly. It's not worth that much. And I think one journal had this much. Okay. Now what happens when I don't enter a grade? Does that count as 0? Or does it count as?
When I do it, I think I have to enter a 0 before it registers.
Yes. Yes.
Otherwise, it doesn't change the percentage of their
Right.
grade.
So by default, if you don't enter, if the student has not submitted the paper or has not earned any points, and you're not entering a 0, it'll dismiss, the Moodle will dismiss that cell and not average it or calculate it. So if a student truly has a 0 or has not submitted the assignment, that would be the accurate value, so that it accurately reflects what the student has earned. And I think, let me see here. This one's paper, yes. So what was the course total, was about 130? 150, right, because we added the 20 points, right? And so let's say the student has been present and participated fully, and this student hasn't.
Before my course, the course total was always in the beginning.
Yes, and there's a setting, you can actually move this column over here,
Oh.
and maybe Jason can help us, show us how we can do that, because it's really kind of cumbersome to scroll to the having to scroll to the right, that you could actually set it up to appear right here. And so students can always see their name next to their email and their final grade.
I don't know how mine was set up that way, because I certainly didn't do it.
Yeah, I think most courses come set up that way, but that's a settings issue. That this column would actually appear over here. So you can add the grade at the assignment level, right? or you can add it at the gradebook level. Once you add it here and the orange color appears, then that is the final grade. If you need to make changes, this is where you need to come back to. Otherwise, the change will not be recorded. So those are two things to remember, that if you leave it blank as well, or a student submits late, maybe a student has contacted you and says, I have had an emergency in my family, and you might want to enter a grade just to remind yourself, and if you need to change it and the student earns that point, you can always come back and add the points. But for the sake of student feedback, I have found it's actually more accurate to tell them that they have a 0. Otherwise, the overall grade lets them know that they're actually doing quite well. Because if you don't enter the 0, they could have 100 points and they say, oh, I'm doing quite well because you didn't enter the 0. They think, well, really I'm missing not any assignments. So one thing that I do is if I haven't received the assignment by the due date, I put in a 0 and say, I did not see a submission for this assignment. So if I missed something, the student can contact me, and maybe I just didn't see it, or it is still missing. But it is also a good way to provide accurate, up-to-date feedback to the student on their grade. Any questions about submitting grades? So this is one way to always check at the beginning of the class, are all the assignments in the gradebook the way they are advertised or written in the syllabus. So it's very easy to miss an assignment, or how do we account for assignments that don't require a submission? So we can always assist you with that. And that's
Part of our curriculum is to, students have to turn in papers that they do an oral presentation, and there's nothing connecting it. I just have to, well, I mean, in the syllabus you see it, there's an oral presentation, I have to grade the two separate and add them together.
Are they separate? So you don't have that until they actually present.
Right, so I don't grade it separately in Moodle, but I grade it separately on my little worksheet.
But now you can, because you know how.
Now I can,
Because you add a graded item,
yes,
that's just the presentation.
yes.
And in that case, it might make sense to put that, if the presentation and the paper would be a category, you could also make that part of a category.
Yes, I think that, yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Any other questions?
When you
Yes.
make changes to grades and so on, are the students notified in any way, or they have to come here to see their
When
grades?
there is, I think when I go here, you can select, notify students. If this is clicked to yes,
You will email them?
that will send them a notification. But, I tell my students that to check their grade book regularly. I do it on the weekly announcements and say, please check your grade book, double check to see if anything is missing, or are you not receiving grades that you think you should have received grades for. So, and then with the forum, that also depends on whether they're subscribed to it. Usually we leave all forums optional for subscription. Don't make it a forced subscription, otherwise students get emails from every time somebody submits, and that gets to be very cumbersome. So, in the interest of time, I know we're actually beyond the time. I just wanted to alert you to a new feature coming that we're very excited about in Moodle, and that will be the ability to submit final grades through Moodle. If you're teaching now, you know that you still submit grades separately through Campus Cruiser, and the new feature, Moodle will be updated in October, and you actually will be able to submit final grades from within Moodle. And that, I think, will be will be very useful. You can do that student by student. You don't have to do the entire class. If you're completing half of the course, you can submit those already, and then complete the rest over the weekend. So information about that will be forthcoming, and that's something many have been looking forward to. But that makes even more important, right? The setup of the actual assignments, and make sure all the assignments that are all accounted for in the gradebook, the way they are outlined in the syllabus. If you want to know more about the gradebook or anything in Moodle, we always encourage faculty to log in to the academic tools in the resource section. Particularly Atomic Learning is a series of video tutorials that you can access. And you come to a page like this and your Moodle login will work. Okay? So it has many other resources, not just about Moodle, but if you just type in Moodle into the search box, then you can select Moodle tutorials. The university is currently on, correct me, 3.0, 3.1. There are slight differences in training for students, training for instructors. So instructor training, 3.1 will work. There might be slight differences. The university is currently on 3.0. Okay. You can also tell all students have access to this. If they ask you something about Moodle or anything else, you can always direct them to Atomic Learning. The other resource is Docs, Moodle Docs. That's also at the bottom of your handout, docs@moodle.org. If you select the right version, we are on 3.0 right now. There are all kind of other resources that you can access. And then always contact the Center for Online Learning. If you want to play around with that a little bit, Larry, just let us know, and we can help you think about setting up your course if you'd like. Okay. If you have any other questions, going to be around for a few minutes. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Hopefully this was helpful to you in maybe adding some things to your gradebook.